technology is great when it works. When it doesn't, oh well. If it wasn't nervous enough to stand up here and preach, I only do this once in a while. And but I have a special audience this morning. I brought my son, granddaughter, and great-grandchildren here with us this morning. And that's a special thing. Anyways, I don't know if you can hear me or not. If you can't, I'll move over there. I double-checked my zipper to make sure it was up so I could stand behind this. It's just one of those things. We're going to talk this morning about rocks in a pond. When I was little, and all through my growing up years, we had a farm pond. It wasn't a big pond. It probably wasn't as big as this room. But it was something that the cows could walk through a little bit, get cooled off in the summer. It was a source of water for the farm. But it was a fun thing to do as I'm walking by, going to get the cows and walking, just to pick up a rock and throw it in the pond. You throw the rock in. What happens to a rock when it hits the water? Makes a splash. Then what? Sinks to the bottom. But my dad showed me a little trick one day. It took me a while to master this, but it was an amazing thing. You take a little rock, and you hold it in your hand just right, and you kind of take an angle, and you spin that rock towards the water, and that hits the water, and it will skip across the water. And if you give it enough of a spin, it can make it all the way across the pond. If it doesn't make it all the way across the pond, it sinks. It's almost like that rock walks on water, except it really doesn't. We're going to talk this morning a little bit about a rock that walked on water. Now, the rock that we're going to talk about actually wasn't the hard piece of dirt-type material that got real hard, doesn't come apart in the water. We're going to talk about a man. Actually, Rock was his nickname. People in the movie screens that there's Dwayne Johnson who goes by the nickname The Rock. And then there's the Sylvester Stallone movies that talk about Rocky. People are nicknamed Rocky or The Rock, different. Sometimes it's because of the way they're built. They have a commanding presence about them. Sometimes it's the way their head's built, thick and stubborn. And my dad had some nicknames for me. He never called me Rocky. He called me Bonehead at times. But this fellow that's nicknamed Rocky, he's nicknamed Rocky in the Bible. It doesn't translate real well. So they just translate it and they call him Peter. The word Petra in the Greek means rock. He went by Peter or Cephas every once in a while. And both Peter and Cephas mean stone, rock. And it's all over that part of the world. It doesn't much matter where you are. There's a rock. You can bend down, pick it up, and throw it. Throw it at the water, throw it at the person. It can be a form of defense. It can be a form of putting up a building. Lots of purposes for a rock. But Jesus named his name was Simon. And when Jesus called him to be a disciple, Jesus said, "You're Simon, Rocky." That's your nickname. That's what we're going to call you. And so from that day on, he was referred to occasionally as Simon Peter, but usually just Peter. That's how we know it mostly, just Peter. Rocky is how it should have been translated. But Rocky was with the other boys, 12 of them. It had been an amazing day. Amazing because they'd been with Jesus. Jesus had been looking for a place to get alone. He had gotten some bad news. His cousin, John the Baptist, we call him John the Baptist, his cousin John, had been recently executed by Herod. Herod had him in prison, and the story's there for you to read, but he had him beheaded and bring the head to the table and all that good stuff. Jesus got news, and he wanted to get alone. He wanted to go off by himself. And I guess maybe he realized or knew that when John was gone, there was going to be time for things were going to come to a head pretty quickly. But they had an amazing day because Jesus wasn't alone. He couldn't get alone because the people found him. People came to him. He started teaching them. He started healing them from their illnesses, whatever was wrong. Now, we're going to look at this passage in Matthew chapter 14 today. But each gospel has this account. Jesus had taken the opportunity to feed these people. How many people were there? There were 5,000 men, around 5,000 men there, plus women and children. It had been a long day. He'd been teaching and healing. It was getting late. The sun was starting to set. Jesus looked at the disciples and said, "Boys, it's time to eat." Actually, the disciples came to Jesus and said, "Lord, it's getting late. We're hungry. Send these people away to go find food somewhere." Jesus said, "Yeah, you feed them." "You want us to feed them what? You want to take all the money we got in the money?" Judas has the money bag here. You take all this money and go into the towns and buy bread, take everything we've got, and then some, and where are we going to find food for all these people? Jesus said, "What do you got?" And Andrew looks around and says, "Well, I found this young man. He's got 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. What do you think?" Not a lot for all these people. Jesus said, "Have them sit down." So they sit down in the grass here and there, groups of 50s and groups of 100s. And Jesus he looked up to heaven and blessed the food and started to break the bread. I would like to see how he was breaking the bread, because when it was all said and done, 5,000 men got full, plus all the women and children that were there. They gathered up 12 baskets full left over. How does this happen? It didn't happen naturally. This was one of those things that was a miracle. And you can read this account in Matthew, in Mark, in Luke, and in John. Each of them has a little bit something different to add. Some of them doesn't say as much. But in Matthew, he talks a little more about this night on the boat. See, the end of the day came. All these people had eaten. Jesus says, "We're done. You guys get in the boat. I'll meet you on the other side." So the disciples get in the boat. Jesus shakes hands and tells these people goodbye. And he goes off into the mountain to pray and have some alone time. Meanwhile, the disciples are out on the Sea of Galilee. And the wind has gotten what the scripture calls contrary. And that's where we pick up the account in Matthew chapter 14, verse 22. Actually, we're picking up where Jesus puts him in the boat. He says, "Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, while he sent the crowds away. After he sent the crowds away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. And when it was evening, he was there alone. But the boat was already a long distance from the land, battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the 4th watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea." Not swimming on the sea. Not walking around the sea. walking on the sea. Only time I've ever walked on water is when it's been frozen. You can walk on water when it's frozen, but you can't walk on the Sea of Galilee because it doesn't freeze. The temperature, though, the water flows, the Jordan River flows in from the north, it flows out from the south. The water, it's a big enough body of water that it doesn't freeze. He's not walking on ice. Anyways, when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. They said, "It's a ghost." They cried out in fear, but immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter said to him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But seeing the wind, he became frightened. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and took hold of him and said to him, "You have little faith. Why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind stopped. And those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "You are certainly God's Son." The boys were having a rough night in the boat. Big enough boat. This was a fishing boat. These boys, at least 4 of them we know, were fishermen by trade. Peter, Andrew, James, and John had lived on the north shore of Galilee. They were fishermen. They knew how to throw nets in the water. They knew how to navigate the boats. They also knew the Sea of Galilee, that it could be rough at times. Storms could come up instantaneously, and they could be rough, life-threatening even. And that's what happened on this evening. Jesus sent them off. It was evening. And the winds, Matthew says the winds were contrary. We've seen contrary people, contrary animals, contrary winds are not being helpful. They want to go this direction, and the wind's coming from that direction. So what do? They pull the sail down. They get the oars out, and they start rowing across the water. They're trying to get to the other side of the lake. They're on their way to Capernaum. Rowing all night long. How long? Well, in the 4th watch of the night, as Matthew says that Jesus came to them, we're talking somewhere between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the morning. That would be the 4th watch of the night. So it's almost towards dawn. Just enough, maybe there's enough light that you could just barely start to see forms. The storm hasn't stopped. These guys have been out there all night long. They've been working hard. They're pulling on the oars to get across this lake and be done. Jesus said he'll meet us in the morning. And they look up, and in the distance, they see a form. Somebody's coming to them walking on the water. Okay, obviously, it must be a spirit. It must be a ghost. Because people can't walk on water. These guys knew that. They'd spent enough time in the water. They were fishermen. They know what happens if you jump in the water. You either sink or you swim. They were afraid. It's almost like we've been out here, it's been a rough storm, and now we're seeing this coming to take us home. This is it, boys. Get ready for the end. They were afraid. So Jesus calls out to them. And the translations in our Bibles are not good translations, actually. Because what Jesus says is, he says, take courage. Yeah, that's okay. Next thing he says, Most of the scriptures are translated, "It is I." It's not what he says. They said it is I because the tense makes sense. Jesus said, he said, "Take courage. I am. Don't be afraid." When Jesus said, "I am," it was the same kind of reference that we've heard this before. Moses at the burning bush, he's having a conversation with God. God's having a conversation with him. And God says, "You go down to Pharaoh and tell the people to get ready because I'm going to deliver them from slavery." And Moses says, "Well, when I tell them that God has sent me, what's the name? Who do I tell them sent me?" And you say, "I am." I am. If you think about this concept of "I am," it's a form of the verb to be. It's a present tense. And when God said, "I am," he was saying, "I am." And that's all. He is the God that created the universe. It went from nothing, absolutely nothing. There was no time. There was no space. There was no matter. There was nothing. And now, at the moment of creation, "I am" spoke the universe into existence. It's one of those things that we've been looking at a little bit in a Wednesday night study. We spent a couple of weeks talking about the creation and the Big Bang Theory and how we live in an expanding universe. And these are the scientific principles that determine that the universe that it had a beginning. For many years, they went with the concept of the steady state Earth, steady state universe. It's like it's always been here. Well, it had a beginning. And it's just been amazing to me to read some of the scientific stuff that points to a creation moment. A creation moment. When time began, when space began, when stuff was here. And when Jesus said, "I am," basically he was saying, God is here. Take courage, boys. The night's almost over. God's here. Don't be afraid. You know, sometimes it takes a storm to get our attention. We've had the experience here over the last few years of witnessing some horrific storms down in Carolinas and even southwestern Virginia. We had that, Helene? I don't remember the name of these storms. There have been so many. But devastating floods, devastating winds, devastating storms. But the physical storms of the weather patterns bring, aren't the only storms of life that we face. Sometimes we face storms when it comes to issues of death. Maybe it's the death of a parent or a spouse or even a child. Maybe it's a divorce or a job loss or a financial setback, a bankruptcy issue that you have to face. Maybe it's your health. Maybe you've gone to the doctor and he says, well, the test came back and there's cancer. Maybe it's your future that you're worried about. Maybe it's your past. Maybe these things are genuine storms for you. It's been a rough night in the boat along the way, as it were. So what did you do? What did Peter do? Peter looked out and he saw Jesus. He said, Lord, if it's you, bid me to come to you on the water. What did Jesus say? Peter, you're safe in the boat. Stay there. I'll be there in a minute. That wasn't what he said. He said, come on, Peter. Jump out the boat, get in the water, and walk over to me. So Peter gets out of the boat, jumps in the water, and starts walking over to Jesus. Just like he was supposed to. It was working out for him. He was walking on water. We can't do that. And all of a sudden, Peter realized. He looked. Scripture says he saw the wind. He saw the storm. He saw the waves. What did he not see all of a sudden? He did not see. Jesus was still there. But he saw the storm. You know, when you're in the middle of the storm and you see the storm, sometimes it's hard to see Jesus. And for Peter, his focus had been on Jesus, and now it was on the storm. What happened to his faith? It just kind of disappeared. His heart probably kind of melted within him. So, what am I doing out here? I can't walk on water. And all of a sudden, he couldn't walk on water. There's a phrase that says, it's an encouraging phrase. It says, if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't. So you're better off to think you can. Peter realized, I can't. Okay, there's a lot of things in life that I can't do. If the air conditioner breaks, I can't fix it. I have to call the air conditioner repairman. There are things that are beyond me physically. Some of the things I used to couldn't do, now I can. And it doesn't bother me so much anymore. Some of these things used to bother me. Not so much. You get used to the idea of I can't do it all. I can't do it, and I don't care. But most of what I used to worry about, this doesn't matter. But when Peter took his eyes off of Jesus, took his focus off of Christ, he began to sing. Reality set in. Okay, Jesus is reality. God is reality. He's there. Where's your faith? So Peter started to sing. What was his comment? Lord, save! I know. It says, Lord, save me. But he didn't have time to get the big part out. Jesus was there with his hand immediately. So he said, hold on a second, Pete. It'll take me a minute to get there. When I get there, we'll get you out. No. He was there right now, and lifted him up out of the water. He said, little faith. You had little faith. Why would you doubt? Why would you doubt Jesus? He did with Jesus. He hadn't learned anything from what he saw earlier in the day. Less than 24 hours ago, Jesus had fed the multitude with just 5 loaves, 2 fishes. He's seen Jesus heal people left and right. Where was his faith? When Jesus shows up, take courage. Increase your faith. How much faith does it take to believe in Jesus? How much faith do you have to have? Jesus said, if you got faith like a grain of mustard seed, it's a tiny little, just a little tiny bit of faith. But it's genuine faith. There's a tiny bit of faith that says, I'm open to the possibility. I'm open to believing. Jesus can do something with that. Jesus is present. He's in charge. He needs to be the focus. Jesus took Peter by the hand. They got back into the boat. And immediately, the storm stopped. The reality is, when Jesus showed up, the power of the storm was done. Because Jesus was in control of the weather. Jesus was in control of the storm. And in the storms of your life, there might be issues that you still have to deal with. It's kind of like when Moses led the people through the Red Sea. God didn't make the Red Sea disappear. They still had to walk through the midst of the water. So the water parted and they walked through. God was there. God showed up. God shows up for you every time. So many times he's just a prayer away. He's waiting for you to focus your attention on him instead of being focused on yourself. When Peter was focused on Jesus, he could walk on water. But when he began to see the circumstances and feel that the circumstances were in control, and feel that and focus on himself and the peril that he was in, all of a sudden he was in genuine trouble. But Jesus had the invitation that Jesus presented to Peter when Peter said, "Have me walk to you on the water?" Jesus said, "Come." The invitation to come to Jesus is an invitation that Jesus has extended, and it's an invitation that is always open. It's always there. It's always for you. Invitation to come. But that's not the only invitation that Jesus gives us. He also gives us an invitation to go. Not in this passage of Scripture, because as soon as they were in the boat, John tells us immediately the ship was at its destination. The boat was at its destination. How does that happen? Well, kind of a miraculous thing. No more rowing the boat. No more depending on the wind. No more depending on your circumstances. You depend on Jesus. Jesus calmed the storm and they were at peace. Jesus will calm the storms in our life and give us peace if we put our faith and our trust and our focus in him. The more we focus on ourselves, the farther we get away from Jesus. The more we focus on ourselves and our needs and our priorities and what we want, what we feel we should have, the farther we're taking ourselves away from Jesus and placing ourselves in his hands, in his control, in his care. So what's our response? This was just a nice story about Peter walking on the water, a nice story about Peter's rescue. But there's a lesson here that goes beyond just the story. There's a lesson here for us. A lesson here that when Jesus extends the invitation to come, he's serious about the invitation. And he gives us an opportunity to come. When he gives us the command to go, he's also serious about that. Interesting thing about this lesson with Peter, Peter was the only one who jumped off the boat. Sometimes if we're going to do something for Jesus in this world, we're going to have to get off the boat. We're going to have to leave our place of safety and secure what we think is security and put ourselves in his hands. Let him lead and let him be in charge and let him take care of us. You know, one of the things in my life that I look back on and I regret was I grew up on the farm. That was my focus. That was where I planned on spending my life. I was going to be a dairy farmer, like my father before me, like his father before him. I was going to milk cows the rest of my life. And there were times after I went to Bible college and was kind of wondering what was coming next. not knowing what was coming next, it's like, well, I can always go back and milk cows. And I kept that thought in the back of my mind for a long time. I can go back and milk the cows. Thought about it a few times. Never did. But as long as we keep looking back and thinking, well, I've got this safety net. I've got this is going to cover me if things don't work out. Folks, we need to turn our lives over to Jesus and let Him be the one that gives us the direction. Let Him be the one that takes us down the road. Let Him be the one that opens up the path